Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Edges in 30K Media. Today I have a 1990 240sx review for you guys, also known as S13. For those of you guys that have followed my channel, you know that I bought this car about a little over a year ago. And at that time it was completely bone stock. I did a couple things to it, but I'm not going to try to go off track too much and just kind of keep this review based on the car itself and how it drives. Give you guys some pros and some cons, some feedback on what I think the 1990 240sx is, and whether you guys should buy one or not. We'll take into a lot of factors such as like drift tax. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about like drivability. We'll also talk about like space, and then lastly we'll talk about maintenance and see how much you guys have to spend to drive a car like this. So first off, I want to talk a little about like the pros of owning a 240sx. Right off the top of the bat, you guys might think that, hey, I'm buying a 1990 240sx. It's a really old car. It's about 25, 26 years old. Why would I want to go out of my way to buy a car like this? So let me give you guys some history. So the 1990 240sx was brought over here to the States, and it came with a K24E, KA24E, and that is a single overhead cam. If you want a little bit more power, you're going to have to go with the D, which is a dual overhead cam, which is, I guess, the 92 and higher. But I like this car personally because I like owning a little piece of history. And you don't find too many 240sx's these days in very mint condition. I bought this car pretty much in mint condition. It has only about 67,000 miles to this day. And I bought it with about 63,000 miles. So I put barely any mileage on it. And there's something about driving a 90s car that just brings back so many memories, and I grew up in that 90s era, such as like the Integra Type R, the Skyline, the R33, R32, the Sylvia, the 180SX. So those kind of cars kind of like mean a lot to me because I grew up kind of like idolizing those cars. So owning one now, even though it's a USDM version, it's still, fairly hard to find. If you go on Craigslist nowadays or on eBay, you're going to find a lot of 240s that are like beat up, that are turned into a drift missile, pretty much not really well taken care of. So I was really lucky enough to come across a car like this. And one of the pros about owning something like this is that if you take really good care of it, car enthusiasts and people that appreciate 240s will actually stop and talk to you and ask you, like, what have you done to the car? How did you keep it so clean? So I feel like there's a sense of like pride and accomplishment when you own such a classic JDM car. One of the other pros that I think owning a 240 is that this might be kind of minor to you guys, but to me, I love the flip-up headlights. And I know you're buying a car just for like cosmetic reasons, but I think I just like the classic flip-up style because you don't see cars these days, especially with the newer cars, with all that new technology coming out, you don't see cars doing that anymore because I guess partially because flip-up headlights they die, the motor dies, and then you're going to get one headlight that goes up, or you're going to get one headlight that goes down, or you're going to get both going down. They're going to get stuck. So but I just like the fact that it's so classic that it brings back a true sense of like old school JDM engineering, and I like that a lot. One of the other pros is that the car has about a 55-45 front to rear weight differential, and being a rear-wheel drive car, the car is, I think, a little bit underpowered, but it's not what the 240 is about. When you drive this car, you kind of have to step on the gas for it to go. But once you get it going and you take into the corners, you're carving the corners, going to the canyons, it feels really stable, and it feels really, really like every driver input, the car responds. And you don't get a lot these days. There's so many electronic assists, there's so many like VSA, so many variables that newer cars have now that takes away from the driving experience. So driving this car right here, basically, it's pretty much up to you to control the car. There's nothing assisting you. There's no VSA, there's no ABS, there's even no airbag. So pretty much if you don't know what you're doing, you pretty much dig yourself in your own hole. But then again, if you know what you're doing, the sky's the limit. So I think that's another thing about owning this car is that it's lightweight, it's cheap, it's easy to maintain, and you have to actually learn how to drive a real drive car in an old JDM car to actually hone your skills. But there's so many pros. I can go on and on and on about the pros, but if you guys are looking for a 240sx, it's going to be finding a needle in a haystack. Do your research, look on Craigslist, be patient, enable all those alerts, when somebody posts a 240, so you can actually view it and be the first one to like contact the seller. I actually had to do a lot of digging around. Luckily, the guy that had the car before me did a really good job of taking care of the car. It was a one owner, bone stock, unmodified and uncracked dash, which is super rare these days. So I got really lucky, and I think I'm going to try to keep it like that. Pretty much keep up with the maintenance, and that's another thing leading into a con is that you can't really think of too many cons when owning a 240 other than rusting, being beat up, turned into a drift missile. But taken into my situation, I bought a really clean, pristine 240, but I had to do a lot of groundwork and a lot of maintenance to get the car up and running smoothly. Speaking of cons, you're going to have gaskets that are worn out. You're going to have maybe slight misfires here and there. You're going to have worn suspension components, worn bushings. You're going to have to do a lot of troubleshooting. With the older JDM cars, they come with OBD1. So you're going to have to pull out the ECU and literally count the number of flashes. And if you miss a flash, you're going to diagnose the wrong problem. So I had to do a lot of troubleshooting just to get little issues fixed here and there. I'm not going to go into too much details, but it's something that you're going to have to be very patient with when you're buying an old car. And another thing is there's a drift tax with this car. So when you buy a 240, you're going to have to take into consideration the drift tax, meaning there's a lot of 240s out there that are bought for drifting. It's very popular amongst the drift scene. And so with that comes the drift tax. So you're going to pay a lot more for a car that's worth a lot less. So for example, if a 240 on Kelley Blue Book is only worth $2,000, you're going to have to pay about $5,000 or $6,000. But for a premium, pristine 240, look to pay about between $7,000 or $8,000 for one. And for those of you guys that can't afford it or think, oh, that's insane, why am I even paying this much for a 240? Keep in mind that these are getting more rare and rare and rare. And this is even more rare than my S2000 or even more rare than a lot of Civics out there these days. And to find one that's pristine, it'll take a lot of work. So that's just a con and a headache you're going to have to put in the time and be patient to get. Another thing is that the space is actually very limited. You're going to get very limited space in this car. The trunk space is fairly small. You can only fit a couple bags in there. A little bit bigger than an S2000, but still it's fairly small. And the thing about that is you can insure this car as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if something happens to the car, if somebody hits you or if you hit something, you're going to have to put out money to fix the car itself, because insurance companies aren't going to insure and pay the car. They don't care about the market value of the car. Only you and only we know as a car enthusiast that the car is only worth so much. So that's another thing. You gotta be careful, when you're driving it, and that's why a lot of people, they buy a pristine 240 and then they buy a crappy one, which they build into a drift missile, a track car. So you have two cars that if something happens to that one, you have another one to to take care of or to baby. So that's just a couple of pros and cons, but overall, I love the car. In conclusion, I would recommend you guys, if you can find a clean 240, by all means go for it. It really depends on your vision and what you want out of the car. But for me, I wanted something mint, something pristine that I could drive around and that I could keep, and maybe 10 to 15 years later, I could drive around still and people would acknowledge the fact that it's a classic. So we're gonna just take the car out for a spin, give you guys some more feedback on the car, how it drives, some of the components that I've done to the car that I think would help you guys going forward and looking for one. So without further ado, let's just take the car out, do some quick polls, give you guys some feedback, and we'll do a quick walk around the car and give you guys, an engine, something about the interior, give you guys a quick run through of the trunk, stuff like that. So if you guys have any questions, please post in the comments below. If you guys are looking for a 240, let me know what you guys have found. And don't be afraid to ask me if you have any issues or any pending thoughts. All right, so we'll go ahead and take this car out for a spin. So I'll catch you guys on the other side. Peace. So with the 1990 240sx, it came with the KA24E. Not the DE, it's the single cam, so the single overhead cam. It clocks in about 140 horsepower and 152 pounds of torque. As you guys can see here, I replaced most of the wear and tear components. Right here, there's a vacuum hose right there connecting to the intake. Back there by the EGR, those were also going bad. If you guys don't know what a bad vacuum hose feels like, basically your engine will kind of like hesitate, RPMs will drop and rise and drop and rise. So buying older cars, no matter what, I think even if the car was well taken care of, like this car, I think you still have to take care of that and keep that in mind to replace any leaks. Also installed a strut tower bar. This is adjustable, so I think once it was installed, I could adjust the height of it, and I think it helps a lot with handling. There are a lot of aftermarket ones, but I decided to go with Cusco because I think they make quality parts and they're directly from Japan. I also installed the grounding kit, as you guys can see over here. The grounding kit helps with the ground. Didn't notice much of a big difference, but I think, you know, it doesn't hurt the car. One of the biggest things that I noticed when I bought the car was this gasket was so worn. The gasket right here, I don't know if you guys can see. It's the auto body gasket. And I also replaced this gasket back here, which is the intake air control valve gasket. Those two things after that were done on the car helped it so much. Like the acceleration, the idling was a lot smoother. Also, TPS sensor right here. This went bad twice on the car, so I had to replace it. So far, I've haven't had any issues coming around the third time. So going over here, also upgraded the radiator. My old radiator was, I think, was cracked. Even though the car only had 67,000 miles on it. I did not want to change intake because I want to keep the car as close to stock as possible. You know, I already, I guess, made a big decision going forward and doing the 180SX conversion. But overall, I think the car is still maintaining its stock form. I don't know if you guys ever paid attention to the battery, but my first time using an Optima battery, and you know, I've heard mixed reviews, but overall, I think those are supposed to last longer and I guess provide more power. Haven't had any issues, so pretty good so far. But engine-wise, I think the transmission and the engine are solid in this car. They use truck motors for this car. So I think Nissan also ran these in their trucks, so I think should be pretty solid. We're gonna just walk around and take a look at the back and see how much space is in the interior and in the exterior. So going over here to the interior, I actually swapping these seats. They're from the S13 Sylvia in Japan. They're actually a direct bolt-on. You don't need to modify anything. No modifying the guardrails or the brackets or anything. It just directly bolted in, and it's fairly hard to find. I actually found a set of these on eBay. I took a risk. One of the brackets actually broke. I had to like weld it back in, but other than that, it's really comfortable, a lot more comfortable than the stock 240sx seats, and they fit a lot better and feel better as well. You don't see much in the 240. It's basically a very simple 90s JDM engineered car, as you guys can see. We'll go ahead and take a look over here. The wheel is actually aftermarket. It's from Personal. It's a Neo Grinsom model. And I also have the Works Bell quick release hub back there. It adds to the feel of the car, but it doesn't take too much away from the 240 styling itself. Very, very, very lucky and fortunate for me. My dash is actually uncracked. So a lot of 240s, I think you find them with cracked dashes, and fortunately the last owner took really good care of the car and it didn't sit out in the sun much. I actually replaced all these wiper blades and the signal components right there. Those I actually faded and I think one of them cracked. Let me go ahead and sit down in the car for you guys. So right here, I also replaced with the Pioneer dash. You can actually get a double DIN and it fits perfectly. You don't need to modify anything because with the 240s, you can fit a touchscreen like perfectly. I also wired in a right there. I wired in a dash cam and also my alarm, radar detector. When you wire it in, make sure you guys use the ATC fuse taps, because if you use the wrong one, you'll blow the ignition fuse like I've done twice, and you don't want that. Short shifter, right here also feels very sturdy. Fourth gear and I guess third gear are a little loud, but other than that, it's been pretty solid. I think Nissan kept this car fairly basic. Not much to it. The back seats, as you can see over here, fairly small. I mean, you can barely fit two people back here. I don't know if they put that back here for insurance, you know, just saves to help you save money on insurance or whatnot. But I think, I mean, if you have somebody like 6 or 7 years old that's like 4 feet, you can probably fit them back here. Going over to the components right over here, you get a little cabin component right here. You can open up, store stuff. Can't really store much. Over here you have some stuff. You can store a little bit more equipment. As you guys can see, I carry around some air fresheners and what are these? I think this is oh, these are ignition fuses, just in case I blow ignition fuses, which I have not recently, but you know, you never know. One of my most favorite awesome all-time features are the seat belts, the automatic seat belts, because when you start the car, it goes like this and that, but you always forget to wear this one right here on the side. So make sure you guys bolt in right there and be safe. Other than that, this is the the interior of the 240. Very basic, very sturdy, very nice. I like it a lot. And let's go take a look at the trunk. So as you guys can see here, here's the trunk. Fairly decent amount of space, a lot of padding. You can actually fold this flap right here and still get a lot of space. You can probably fit about some backpacks, some luggages, you know, maybe like some golf clubs, tennis rackets. Fairly solid. Another thing to note, to keep an eye out for, is these gas struts right here that hold up the trunk. These go bad, so I had to replace these when I first bought the car, even though my car only had about 67,000 miles when I bought it. So keep that in mind. And as you guys can see here, with the S13, the 1990 240sx, they only came in the hatchback, which is the model that I have and I personally like a lot better. And they only made this other car in the Coupe model, which is not a hatchback. When you open the trunk, the actually hood doesn't go up all the way like this one does. But I think they're both really good cars, both really awesome. So I'm running in the rear of the car, I'm running 245/40 17s, and these are Yokohama S drives. They're slightly loud, but they grip really well. Running the back, I actually had to roll the fenders a little bit to get it to clear. Running 245s is actually slightly bigger than a lot of what I guess people owning 240s would run. I guess people would run about 225, 235, maybe at the limit, but I also had to do the 5-lug conversion on this car to get it to run these wheels, because as you know, the stock 240s have the 4-lug conversion, the 4-lug, so you won't be able to fit a lot of aftermarket wheels, which isn't, you know, a bad thing. Just gives you more wheel selection, and with different wheels you can run wider tires to fit your liking. Other than that, I think the car is from the factory. A 240 is pretty fun, pretty nimble to drive already, but with certain mods, I think you can make it a little more fun. So I think this is one of the better things and one of the most more advantageous things I've done to the car. So 245s, pretty rare, pretty big, but I'm not running the car super low. Still about a slightly 1.5 to 2 finger gap almost. I don't know how big people's fingers are, but as you guys can see here, there's a slight gap. Moving over to the front, as you can see, the 5-lug conversion, still running the they're the knockoff of the Volk TE37s. These are the rotor grids. As you guys have known, I've also ran this in my Nissan, in my Acura RSX Type S that I sold. Very great, very good wheel, very light and very durable. Haven't had any issues with it. I'm running 235 size tires in the back right over here. They're also the Yokohama S drives, a lot more grippy. Also the roll the fenders and I guess tuck away some of the wiring harness, but other than that, it's been pretty solid. So the suspension from the factory is fairly decent for you know, regular driving. It handles corners well, but I upgraded the car to BC Coilovers. They're fully adjustable, preload. You can adjust the dampening settings, you can adjust the height. So the car handles a lot better now. Not they're on Coilovers, but I mean, no plans to actually track the car. I'm just gonna keep it pristine and keep it clean. Just enjoy the car as is. I think Nissan designed something really special with 90s JDM engineering combined with very low tech equipment, no airbags, nothing. I think the car is for those of you that enjoy driving and enjoy a fun car that you can hop in and it's reliable. Definitely get this 240sx. Don't hesitate. Just make sure that you find a clean one that hasn't had any rust and one that's been well taken care of. A lot more harder than my S2000 for sure. All right, guys, so we're back in the 1990 240sx S13. We're just taking it around town, just gonna drive the car a little bit to get you guys a little feel of the car, give you guys some feedback, some honest feedback, you know, not trying to like sell the car or like upsell it or anything like that. Right off the bat, I think when you get into a 240, whether it's modified or whether it's stock, I think there's like a little nostalgic feeling, like kind of like a deja vu feeling, you know, like, because I grew up in the 1990s era. So a lot of the cars that I've driven were basically 90s Civics, 90s Integras, 90s Nissans, and you kind of develop this feel for like 90s cars, even though you know, weren't born at the time that the car was made. You still have this like attachment to it. So I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of like lusted after the S13 was they're a lot more rare than like Civics or like more than like Integras, except for the Type R model, obviously. But anyway, the car feels very, very direct. There's really nothing assisted with this car. Like, you get into it and you just drive. The transmission and the clutch feel is a lot more different in the 240. It's a lot more forgiving than I think driving like a Civic or like driving like an old school Integra or like a MR2. But I think you just feel very connected to the car when you drive it. The inputs are very direct. When you shift, the throws are fairly short. I do have a short shifter in this car, keep that in mind. But I think if you drive a 240 that is the stock, the throws are a little bit longer. But I think the car still handles great for what it's made of. Given the fact that in the US, keep in mind that the 240s, especially the S13 models, it came with the KA24E and the DE model. We didn't get the turbo version, such as like the SR20 or the KA. I don't remember off the top of my head whether it was like the KA 20 or 12 DET. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll probably post a little correction when I make the video for you guys. But I think there's pros and cons to it. I think partly because of emissions and, you know, being here in California, I think the emissions are a lot more strict. So you can't just be driving around like modified cars that are turbo, because, you know, as you all know, people that buy 240s will end up swapping in SR20s anyway and turboing them or like drifting them. It's pretty rare these days that you find 240SXs, whether they're S13s or S14s, in fairly bone stock form, if not bone stock. I tried to keep this car bone stock for a while, but I ended up starting, you know, to modify things here and there. You know, you buy an old 20-something-year-old car, you still have to keep in mind that you got to fix the little things that are broken, like the bushings, the axles, the valve cover gaskets, the vacuum hoses, throttle body, like little stuff like that. But it's all about the fun of owning the car, you know. Try to like take the car up for, you know, like some open roads so we can kind of get a little more pulls in, and you guys can get a feel of what the car is like. The car is not fairly fast by any means. You don't buy this car to have a super fast car, you know. You buy this car to have fun in, and I think part of the fun is just enjoying the car as is. It's very light. It's about 2,800 pounds. I did swap in the Infiniti, I think J30 aftermarket. Not aftermarket, I'm sorry. I swapped in an LSD from an Infiniti J30, and I think that helped the car with handling, because the 240sx comes with an open diff. So if you're driving in snow or stuck in a ditch or something like that, you're going to be kind of screwed. But after swapping in the diff, the car does feel a little bit more planted. I could take corners a lot harder and kind of power out of them. So one of the things that I think, you know, if you have a 240 and you want to upgrade the handling department, you should probably look into that. We're probably gonna take a right here and get some pulls in. Keep in mind, guys, this is not an S2000 like my other car, so you won't be able to drive fast, or you do not want to drive fast in the city anyway. But I feel good driving this car. I mean, there's nothing crazy about owning a 240 other than that people think you just own it to drift. But if you do the certain things to it, and both internally and externally, you can turn a lot of heads. To be honest, I get a lot more people come up to me that have owned this car over my S2000, and they're asking me, "Oh, where's this car from? Where did you buy it? How come it looks so nice? It's a 1990." And then when I tell them it is a 1990, and I show them the flip-up headlights, which is, I think, one of the best features about the 240 is the lights, they start asking me a bunch of questions. I still get people come up to me once in a while in the S2000, but this car is just a whole different league of its own. And I don't care about the fact that it's slow, only having about 140 horsepower, I think. You still can have a lot of fun in this car, taking it to the canyons, do some. Yeah, it still feels really solid. I mean, it goes. You gotta like step on the gas to get it to go. You don't feel like instant pull if you're coming in driving like a S2000 or like a WRX or like a Evolution or something like that. This is gonna be like a complete downgrade. But if you look at it in like terms of like owning a classic, owning something rare, owning something clean, owning a piece of history, classic JDM 90s engineering, then there's so many more pros than cons. It's all about your perspective. And for me, and part of Edgerton 30K, I guess, media's channel is that we want to just enjoy the car for what it is and take care of it. And looking back, maybe like 15, 20 years later, you can kind of appreciate that you have such a rare gem, and owning like a unicorn is, it's all about, being passionate about cars. But going back to the car, I think it's really great. I think I haven't done anything to the engine, basically just like replacing the valve cover gasket and making sure it has good oil. Other than that, short shifter, good coilovers, adjustable arms and rods, and you can get a really good alignment out of the car. And putting wider tires in the car and then getting it corner balance, it's really, really fun, especially on the canyons. It's one of those cars that you still got to drive to enjoy. You can still drift it, but I would rather drive this car and just enjoy it and get the most out of it. That's just my philosophy, and I think that, I want to keep the legacy of the 240 alive, and maybe like 15 years later, I'll still drive it on the road, and people will be like, "Hey, this is it's still a rarity these days," but at least somebody out there will appreciate it. I'm sure there's other people out there that appreciate 240s for what it is other than drifting. But don't get me wrong though, drifting is still fun, still cool, and it's still a great motorsport to take on. But I just want to enjoy the car as is, and other than that, I mean, you guys are looking for a 240, I mean, I recommend looking everywhere. By everywhere, I'm meaning like not only in the city that you live in, but like in other states, other countries if you must. I think that's a little bit too hardcore. But it's really hard to find. I actually took me like about a year to find a clean, unmolested 240sx. And you really have to look. I mean, I got lucky. The guy that owned the car, the story behind it was he was a really hardcore Initial D fan. He imported a Treno, the A86, over to the States, and he drove that mostly. And he had a truck, and then he had this car. This car, he kept it bone stock because, like a lot of 240sx owners, they want to keep it stock because they know it's rare. You do have to pay the drift tax, and unfortunately, that's something that you cannot avoid. But if you can actually afford it, I always say go for it. This car only has 67,000 miles, and I bought it with only 63,000 miles. So I've only put 4,000 miles on it since I've owned it, a little over a year. But by all means, look around, make sure it's unmolested, make sure it's rust-free. That's another key thing. A lot of old cars, especially old Japanese cars, they are really prone to rust. So you gotta be careful with that. And do an underbody inspection, take it to a shop. You cannot avoid leaks. There's gonna be leaks, whether it's like air leaks or like oil leaks or whatever. Like you're gonna have to deal with those. It doesn't matter if your car is pristine or not. It's just part of owning an old car. So try not to stress too much about that. Other than that, I mean, running coilovers and running a good set of tires and adjusting dampening rates, you can drive fairly comfortably in the city. Right now, I'm running about 10 clicks from hard, so it's fairly doable, not too rough, Although swapping out the differential in the car, it's a little bit louder. You can kind of hear it if I get on it. Do a little pull. And I'm running it also in HKS catback exhaust. It's fairly OEM looking, believe it or not. They have a certain model that's blacked out in the back, and the exhaust tip isn't that big, so you kind of don't drag a lot of, get a lot of attention from other cars or a lot of cops. I mean, I think it's a great car. I think it's one of those cars that you really have to like put in the time and the effort and the money to own, because you can't just be one of those cars you drive in and it's just reliable and you just do maintenance on it. You really have to take your time and learn the car, have some kind of car knowledge to own the cars, to own like an older car, because for the longest time, I think for 3 or 4 months, I had an engine light. I could not diagnose the problem. And no matter what I did, I pulled the codes, I fixed everything that was fixed, but in the end, it was a bad ECU. So you have to kind of keep in mind as well, you have a federal ECU and you have a California ECU. So keep in mind that and troubleshoot accordingly. Overall, I think the 240 is a great car. If you're looking for something that's like classic and something that's like fun to drive and it looks great and you own a piece of history, get the 240. If you're looking for something like it's fun to drive, it's fast, it's lightweight, doesn't require a lot of maintenance, maybe get something else like a Miata or like a S2000 or like a BRZ. That's better technology, probably a little bit cheaper to maintain. But like I said, this car isn't about performance as much as it is having like sentimental value for me, because I always wanted a S13 and it was hard to find. Believe it or not, I like the way that the 180SX looks, and I like the flip-up headlights. And I like just owning a piece of classic JDM engineered car. And I think there are many cars out there, but I think the 240 is one of the more rare ones, and I'm happy that I own it. But let me know what you guys think, Let me know what you guys think about owning a 240sx, whether you have an S13 or an S14 or even an S15. I know I've seen a couple of those in Los Angeles. I know they're illegal here, but those of you guys that own that, hey, props to you guys. I don't know how you do it, but for me personally, I'd be probably stressed the hell out. Like, I got a smog now. Oh, I gotta. Anyway, I don't want to get into too much detail about that. But yeah, please post in the comments below. Let me know, guys. Happy New Year. It's the 30th over here in December 2018. Wherever you guys are, whether you're in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Asia, I wish you guys all a Happy New Year and happy holidays. Be safe, enjoy your cars, whatever you own out there. Drive it and enjoy it, because life is too short to like leave your car in the garage. I should really take my advice on that. I will talk to you guys soon, alright? Have a great one, have a good one, drive safe, and peace.